What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, occasionally, throughout the history of the NBA, there have been times when scoring became an issue. And even if hardcore NBA fans liked the defensive, physical aspect of the basketball game, casuals and high octane offense loving fans prefer a certain type of basketball, and usually they went out and the NBA makes adjustments to try to push up scoring. We first saw this in the 1950s, where there was a period of time in the early going into the mid 50s when scoring was going down. Teams were averaging between 70 to 80 points a game, and basketball was starting to mimic football, where you saw that this was a league that you could still double hand check, and there was a thing called mauling that was legal back then. It was very physical. Guys threw elbows, got black eyes, broken noses. This was before the shot clock too, so a team could hold the ball for extended periods of time before they put up a shot. So oftentimes you saw very, very low scoring games. The lowest scoring game in the history of the NBA came in the early 50s, when I think it was the Fort Wayne Pistons played the Minneapolis Lakers. I think the Lakers beat the Pistons 19-18. So this was a problem. So the shot clock was implemented. The shot clock was implemented to speed the fucking game up. Now, unfortunately, this caused the early demise of a guy like George Mikan, who was already sort of worn out by playing that hard-nosed style of basketball back then. But now you're telling George Mikan, who's 6'10" and 270 pounds, and on the downside of his career, to kind of just go up and down this faster pace, and it didn't work. He retired. He did come back briefly, but then retired again. But scoring did go up. All right, scoring went up from around maybe 80 points a game to 90 something points a game, then 100, and then by the late 50s, 110 points a game. And for the most part, from the late 50s, reaching a peak in the 1960s with almost 120 points a game. Even in the 70s, it stayed well above 110 points. Into the 80s, it stayed over 110 points. But then you started having some exceptions. The Bad Boy Pistons played a physical style of basketball. And I believe the Pistons were the first team in a very long time to hold opponents under 100 points a game in some series. And you started seeing first on the East Coast, the Pistons, the Knicks, who mimicked a lot of the Detroit Pistons style when it comes to defense. But for most of the 90s, you still saw high scoring, especially in the Western Conference. But by the late 90s, you did see scoring begin to take a drop. I think it was a combination of a couple of factors. The NBA is a mimic league, and many teams were trying to mimic the older teams who were the more successful teams in the NBA. The Utah Jazz, the Houston Rockets, the Chicago Bulls, the Pacers. These teams all had superstars who were well in their 30s at that time, and they played a slower half-court pace. The NBA was mimicking this. There was also more of an emphasis on defense. You start seeing guys being drafted based on their defensive abilities. So scoring, as a consequence, went down. By 1999, teams were averaging less than 92 points a game and only shooting 43.7% from the floor. 14 of the top 20 scorers in 1999 were post players. After the Malice at the Palace and after the Detroit Pistons Spurs final in 2005, the NBA was losing hundreds of millions of dollars, and they said enough is enough. We got to change some things. First of all, we got to change the image of our league. We got to start bringing in European players because, look, I'm just being honest. There weren't a lot of white stars in the NBA, so there weren't a lot of American-born white stars. So we got to start bringing in European players. Plus, we got to change this game. It's too physical. Fans are saying it's boring, and it's something that's not said much. The league was too black. Now, when I say too black, the percentage of white players really hasn't changed that much, but you do see a lot more white stars. So that was definitely something they wanted implemented. But anyway, scoring went up. 97 points a game in 2006, then 107 points a game by the time the Warriors started doing their thing. But this year has been ridiculous. Do you know that this year teams are averaging 113.7 points per game? This would be the highest scoring season per team since 1969-1970. That's 53 years ago. Actually, 54 years ago. 54 seasons ago. The average offensive rating is 113, the highest since they've been recording this since 1973. Teams are shooting over 46% from the floor, one of the highest field goal percentages in the history of the league. Effective field goal percentage is the highest it's ever been. Well, at least I think the highest has been one of the highest at least. And there are 11 players. 11. Remember I said 10 before, right? Now it's 11. Add Kyrie Irving to the list. There's 11 players averaging at least 30 points per game. 11! Remember how remarkable it was when Michael Jordan was averaging 30 points a game? 11 players are averaging 30 points a game. 11. Could you imagine what Michael Jordan would be doing in today's NBA? It would be a joke. 11. 43 players. 43 are averaging at least 20. I definitely remember looking at the scoring leaders back in the 90s, and of the top 20 scorers, the last few would be like 19.5, 19.8. Top 20. It might be 16 guys averaging 20 back then. Now it's 43. Luka Doncic is averaging nearly 37 points a game. I know some people be like, well, the guys are so much more skilled. Look, I'll give you that they shoot threes better. All right? I give you that. But they are not playing a lick of defense for most part, except for a couple of teams, maybe the Bucks and the Lakers for great spells. But most of these other teams, I'm watching them, they're not really playing defense at a high level. They're not. They're not. As a matter of fact, if this trend continues, the Lakers are going to win more games than I thought they would, just based on playing defense. But this is insane. Insane. 113.7 points per game. That's insane. But this is what people want. You ask me, give me the NBA of the late 90s. Final scores, 78, 77. You got to see who the real scorers were from the pretenders. Give me that league over this shit. We really only had a few real scorers in the late 90s, early 2000s. We had a few real scorers. As far as perimeter, Kobe, McGrady, Iverson. I'm talking about the premier ones. maybe Vince Carter. That's about it. Today you got probably 20 guys that's averaging 25 points a game. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.